me again just quickly take what Mark has said back to fundamental principles. Since the 1960s, I've mentioned Plato. Plato's idea of the expert society was that it had a myth, which he calls a noble lie, which was to be enforced. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been ruled by noble lies for the past 50 years. Multiculturalism was a noble lie. Climate change was a noble lie. The belief in DEI was another noble lie. Critical race theory is a noble lie. And the noblest and the silliest of them all is transgenderism. What we've got to do, and so this is why, again, I think we need to go back absolutely to first principles. What transgenderism is saying is, words change the world. If I say I am a woman, I miraculously become a woman. Now, this is acceptable in religion. This is, after all, how transubstantiation works. If the priest says, hoc est corpus, miraculously, I am told, the bread and the wine become flesh and blood. We are talking about politics. We're not talking about religion. The left believes in magic. It believes in the magic of words. When, in other words, if you want growth, you don't actually cut taxes and regulation. You dance in a circle around Rachel Reeves saying growth, growth, growth. It's the witchcraft theory of growth. And I would actually punish those who advocated in the same way we used to punish witches. But that's an entirely different matter. But until we realise this, until we do what... Why are we still... We haven't asked why suddenly, Mark, we were able to say all these unsayable things. Why? Because Elon Musk broke the monopoly of Twitter. If he had not marched in 2022 with that kitchen sink, do you think, for example, I would have been able to recover from my cancellation? The answer is no. Only freedom frees you. There's no shortcut. We've got to restore it. If you remember, I said that the great problem with conservatism is we have to have change. The issue is how you define what is acceptable and what is not. And Disraeli, back in his great speeches in 1872, did it with brilliant precision. He said this, by the way, he did his speeches, you've noticed I've had the odd little glass, he gave his great speeches with 2 bottles of brandy, ladies and gentlemen. Soundtrack. None of this nonsense of abstemiousness. Anyway, Disraeli says, in a progressive country, change is inevitable. The question is, what sort of change? Change in accordance with the national tradition, good. Change in accordance with abstract international liberalism, bad. And the problem is, ladies and gentlemen, we've been completely seduced by this idea of international liberalism. I'm afraid Churchill led the way with the settlement at the end of the Second World War, the determination to create an international framework of law so Nuremberg didn't just look like victor's justice. And we made a terrible series of rods for our back. And we got, above all, centrally, what seems to me to be the theme that any proper right-wing government coming in has got to have, is the centrality of the nation and the inhabitants of the nation. And until that is understood, we will get nowhere. At the moment, our elite doesn't believe that. They deliberately believe something different. The man who ran the Treasury, for heaven's sake, Gus O'Donnell, says his duty is not to promote British welfare, but world welfare. There is this complete madness that we have, as I said, with the legal system, it's even more extreme. I mentioned Tom Bingham already. In a great lecture in Australia, he actually defines the purpose of human rights law as follows. It's anti-democratic. It is counter-majoritarian. It favours minorities over majorities. It even lists the minorities, you know, the Mad, the Roma, the Muslim. This is the extraordinary mess we've got ourselves into. And of course, the most ludicrous example is the Chagos Islands. Yeah. But equally, we do have help. America nearly experienced this fate. If Kamala Harris had won, that's exactly what would have happened to America. Because that is why J.D. Vance came over and uttered all those abusive remarks in Munich, which reduced the German chairman of the meeting to sort of blubbering tears. He was crying like a schoolchild. But what Vance said is the fundamental point. We've now got two different meanings of the word democracy. In continental Europe, democracy means protecting minority rights and limiting the majority by law, because of the fear of a repetition of Nazi Germany. In America, it still just means rule by the majority. And we, ladies and gentlemen, are perilously on the point of falling into the European camp, which is, of course, exactly what Blair and Brown and Starmer want, and out of the American one. And do you know what? Everybody says going to America is treason. I would remind people that every single major revolutionary change in Britain involved foreign help, if not foreign leadership. 1689, it was the Dutch. The Tudors, it was the French. Magna Carta, it was the French again, and I can continue. So if the New World redresses the balance of the old, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care. I know most of the leading members. I know most of the leading members of the Fabian Society. I was a don at LSE, the heart of Fabianism, for 25 years. And believe me, they couldn't conspire their way out of a paper bag. But what they do is they set intellectual fashion. And they campaign very, very effectively for two things which have been deeply destructive. The first is they campaign for bureaucracy, to replace ordinary human relations, and particularly charitable activity, by state bureaucracy. And that's the real danger. We've got to ask again. We go on, and I've been going on, about why we were capable of self-government. We didn't just have self-government when we had a parliamentary election. We had self-government through juries. We had self-government through every parish council. We had self-government through the poor law. We had self-government through trade unions, through friendly societies, through the charities that ran schools and hospitals. And what the Fabians were determined to do, what is the great message of the Labour Party, building on the enormous, vast creation of big state machinery from 1916. We were talking about the World Wars. The real mechanism of our state is invented in 1916, particularly the Cabinet Office, the administrative power of the Prime Minister, and so on. And the Fabians seized that moment to turn us into a bureaucracy. And all the things we've been talking about that present so much problem, the quangos, the legal system, the universities, all the things that Matt Goodwin was talking about, they're all run by the same kind of people, with the same kind of education, and the same kind of values that are essentially Fabian, vaguely leftish values. And then the other thing is, what the Fabians campaign for is the expert. So you can see that it's, in one sense, it looks like a conspiracy. It's simply the result of a particular moment in time, of a particular development. The British state barely existed before 1916. It's then the culminating effect of two world wars, and above all, ladies and gentlemen, the creation of the welfare state. It's like, that's what it is, that's what does it. The deliberate destruction of charitable activity, of self-help by the welfare state. And remember, that's again, to throw over to Mark, it's only in the 1940s, not even in the Second World War, did the person on an average income pay income tax. Income tax is only paid by people on average income once you set up the welfare state. In other words, what you're doing is, it's this constant churn. State collects, the state distributes.